Hello again, and welcome to episode number 2 of New Elements Flash Contest entry reviews. So I've been going down through the list of entrants to the New Element Flash Contest and doing a quick review of each of those. So today we'll tackle a couple of more. Probably won't get through all of them, but we'll take a stab at it. The Flash Contest was a quick timeline contest where you had to build a 60 by 60 map with the theme of connectivity. And you also were not able to use custom scenery, hacking, or anything that didn't come with the base game or RCT Classic. So definitely some challenges there. So we made it about a third of the way through the park so far, and next up is this one here. This is Electric Fields. This was a three-person entry, so this one was Trav, RWE, and Lewis. All coming together to make this pleasant little park. And honestly, this ended up being one of my favorites in the contest. Kind of a sleeper hit. It was just a very kind of classic, nostalgic-looking park. So this is kind of based off of the electric field scenario, I think. At least it sort of follows that similar pattern here. So we have a nice little pleasant sort of farm-like entrance. I like the little silos here and the red barn on the way in. Nice little parking lot on the sides here. Coming in right across the bridge, we hit the first of the four coasters. Three, I guess, because the power isn't a coaster. And we have a boomerang right here. So this is a standard Vacoma boomerang, a little bit smaller than the actual boomerang. So it's running a 5-car train rather than a 7. And it's also a mirror image. Usually the station is on the other side, but still, same general layout and a nice little attempt at the supports here on the spikes on either side. So this is aptly named Wipeout, so definitely some UK influences there by the Pleasureland coaster that was also named Wipeout. So let's spin around and we'll go this way. Up and along to the other corner here where we have Jetstar. Which is a great attempt at a Jetstar Schwarzkopf coaster. Again, a mirror image of how they usually are set up, I believe, or at least the ones that I've done are. But a really nice compact layout here with a couple of good turns, helixes, and fitting a pretty good layout in here for the ability to get in without zero clearancing and some other stuff. So that's well done all around. No block breaks, unfortunately. It would have been cool to see multiple trains running at one time on here, but you know, this is a small park, and chances are they wouldn't be running it like that anyways. So over here, some great sort of rural theming. A lot of the rusted roofs, the metal walls, and some of the wood. A little swan boats ride here, which is super pleasant, and some little kiosks in here. We have the restrooms on this side. Over on this side, we have the lakeside suites. So nice reference to the little lake here. Building here, not used, unfortunately, but some pretty cool structure there. I really like this boardwalk element with the metal flooring in there. Coming around the back side, we've got a food court over here. So we've got some nicely named food booths. So well done on actually naming things. A good little restroom here with some green roof texture going on, as well as this piece of kind of trellis over top of the pathway. And on the back side here, we have this Alibaba 1001 Nights ride with a nice little backdrop of theming there. So definitely has that carnival-esque feel to it. Out here in the outskirts, you've got a couple of little houses. So here's a house with a grove to the side of it, and looks like a little soccer net, perhaps, on the back side here. And then another house on this side with a cool little water feature and some more just farm areas here with some of these fruit trees, and then the flowers here used as some plants. Up top, we have a water tower here that reinforces this whole sort of farm industrial type theme. And then the first of these sort of warehouse buildings that you can walk through, which I like especially. So we have a couple more of them over here with the red barn look. Here's a slide on the side, aptly named the barn slide. I like these little overhangs here with the yellow fencing. Kind of makes for festoon lighting almost, but a good look for the overall theme of the space. Like I said, I really like these kind of walk through buildings here. We have a ride inside this one. It's the barnyard play area used as the Space Rings ride. Then over here we have one of the more thrilling rides in the park. This is Great White, an inverted swinging ship. And then up here in the middle, there's the Sun Wheel, which is what you come to as you first cross the bridge. So two more rides over here after the Scrambler here. First one is the Minor Mike. So this is a little powered coaster. There's a little bit of theming in there with the totem pole and some of the cacti and things like that. But cute little layout. I like the little outward bank section here and also the backdrop. Feels very appropriate for a carnival type ride. And then lastly, we've got the Rock and Roller, which I really enjoy. This is a copy of a Fabry spinning coaster layout. Fabry kind of does some odd little layouts with the two lift hills separated by a corner and some lengthwise switchbacks and some various other bits and pieces. I've only ridden one of these, but they were a lot of fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So this is new for 2020, has some space-esque theming there, and also the kind of attempt at making it look like a portable ride on a base frame. I think that's what I like most about this park, is it definitely looks like a little kind of carnival come to the farm, or a lower budget park that is set up here with kind of minimal theming, minimal budget, but they're still making it work and look good. And if you zoom out, it's just got this nice kind of homey feel to it. And squeezed in this little section here between the houses on this side, some of the farmland, and then the river on the other side. So good context as well with the big section of power lines here, and just the landscape overall. So I was a big fan of this park, and I think it ended up being one of my favorite in the contest, just from a pleasant atmosphere standpoint. So let's look at the next one. We will move along. So this is Elonvil by Fred. Not too much to see here. I know this was done rather quick. We've got a bobsled. This is the Daughter of Curiosity. And it's kind of follows typical bobsled maneuvers, but doesn't have a whole lot of flow to it. Just kind of wraps around, a few block breaks in there, 3 actually. But running without the final blocks that it probably needs, so you're going to get held up here on a couple of these bits and pieces, as we saw this last one get stuck here. Theming wise, there's not a whole heck of a lot to look at here. There's this is the Connection Hub Earth to Mars, as the sign explains. This is kind of a nice building. The use of the rockets here is a little odd. The texture is nice, but the rocket really doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. So we have all the various astronauts up here. We've got Yuri Gagarin. We've got Elon Musk, I'm assuming. Here's astronaut Freddie, astronaut Neil. And then all sorts of just random theming, such as the bones and goo, which is awfully ominous. The volcano on fire, and then some of the other odd plants and pieces like that. I mean, it's not bad, but you can definitely tell it was done in like 45 minutes or whatever it was that Fred said he had done it in. So I would have liked to have seen more, but I like using the coaster type you don't see very often, so that's one plus about this one. Well, let's move along. We have the next one is Fantasy versus Reality by Mamarillas. So there's a lot going on in this one. Kind of the general gist of it is this is more reality-based, realism, and this is a little more fantasy-based. So let's start off on the realism side. We've got a coaster getting built right here. This is Ice Storm, which is kind of a neat-looking ride. So here's the top hat that's got some outward banking on it. There's helix coming in here, and then this cool outward banked kind of Rocky Mountain-esque corner, although it kind of feels like a new intimate look as well. But neat construction site, really cool crane. I like that. That's well done. And then the various construction equipment here is nice, as well as the mechanics that are acting as construction workers that all have names as well, and the orange construction fence here is kind of bright and in your face. But looking at the overall space here, we have Grand Carousel on this side, we have Riptide on this side. Really liking the structure for Grand Carousel with the car ride roof and the curved elements there. Looks great. Nicely done. Kind of floating there, but you can sort of assume that it's being held up maybe through the center of the carousel, perhaps. It's honestly, I think, one of the better attempts at this without being able to hack things lower or zero clearance things in. I think that is a good attempt. Over here we have guest services and some of the other buildings within, restroom building, and then presumably these are some food stands, although there aren't actual food stalls in there. Employee parking in the back areas. We have sort of the backstage areas and little AC unit with the spinning fans as well. The facade elements here and some of these parapet walls that are well put together. It definitely has that realistic feel to it. Over here we have Sharpshooter, which I'm assuming we're going to call a B&M inverted coaster. Nice little layout here. Diagonal lift starts off with the drop into the loop here, which we are about to see. Let's watch it go down. Here we go. Loop over underneath the pathway into a Cobra Roll, and then back underneath the pathway. This is the prime path location for Cobra Rolls, as I think everyone knows. It's a good requirement almost. Helix into an inline twist of sorts, another helix down into a double corkscrew. Not a typical thing for a B&M inverted coaster, although Giovanola did do that on theirs. But either way, nice little layout and interacts rather well with the pathway. I like the little targets on either side for the sharpshooter, and the station itself is kind of nice with this big glass facade on there. It doesn't quite fit this overall kind of woodsy look to have a giant panel of glass on the side, but it does look good. I think it's a nice attempt there. Queue line wraps around here, good view of the lake also, and then some backup house areas as you would have. There's also this kind of neat looking sort of diner-esque building along the front here, sort of buried within the inverted coaster here down by the lake. So let's hop up onto the bridge and we are going to cross. It's a pretty interesting theme bridge, maybe best looked at from the side rather than head on. Have some trackatecture here, and I really like the use of the bridge supports here. Nice, I guess more sort of glitch perhaps of this showing through the walls, but looks good as we head over here and we land in the fantasy side. So here we've got a couple of different elements. So the first thing on this side is the Ruin Runner. I am incorrect. So this is running through ruins, aptly named. I should have looked at the theming first. And we have this aqueduct diving through the loop here, which I think is super cool. It's a nice touch, but let's get on here. We've got a nice diving drop into a loop, similar to the inverted coaster on the other side. Wrap around into a batwing instead of the Cobra Roll, framed very nicely by that waterfall that's right there. Back up on top, down and around, and running through a corkscrew, followed by a loop here. Interesting to have the loop, which is, or what you consider a larger inversion, right after the corkscrew, which you consider a smaller inversion. Pacing ends up being a little awkward here, but honestly, it didn't look too bad as far as that goes. Really liking these tilted hedges on here. Those turned out really, really nicely, and it makes a good garden backdrop here. Pretty standard looking station. I'm missing a little bit of the ruin in that as you get out here in the actual ride as far as the theming goes, but it's a good layout, and I like the look of all that. Have those hedges on the other side here, so this makes for a pretty nice entrance. So here's where we really kick the fantasy off as far as a larger coaster goes. So this is the Tower Twister, which is, as you might expect, a twister coaster. This is the B&M sit-down coaster, which we will wait as it wraps up right here, and then we'll take a look at it. Here we have one going. So first of all, we've got our horizontal launch up and over, back into the building. Go back out into a big cobra roll. Up and around. I kind of like this little dive here with the outward bank into the castle again. Wrap around. Dive, huge inversion down to the ground. Helix, Immelman, and then back up to the station. So actually I like this layout a lot. It has some cool flowing elements. I really like this little knotted twisty section here where you have the little dip here into the outward section, banked back down, and then kind of looping around as it goes back to the building itself. Speaking of the building, pretty impressive. It's huge. You've got your Lord Liam at the top here. This is our new element themed castle, perhaps. But it's very impressive. The height is pretty incredible, and the station being halfway up means that the launch doesn't need to be near as big to get a whole lot of ride out of it. On the back side here, we've got a little bit of theming here in the Pirate Village. We've got a couple of the themed guys in here as well. Then here's Pegleg Posix, all the new element members here looking like they have some names throughout. Nice use of the wood track here for the boat. Actually looking really good for, especially for no hacking. It's a pretty impressive design overall here on the water. But nice looking park. Again, we have the similar trope to some of the others of river down the middle and then an A and a B side. This doesn't necessarily scream heavy fantasy compared to the realism side. Actually, this coaster is not awful kind of as it is. But I like it overall. This is a pretty cool layout. Honestly, my favorite layout, perhaps. But I'm a big fan of that. So it's a good look overall. And then one of my favorite details here is just these gardens here with the sort of lattice pattern as you come on in. Alrighty, let's move along to the next one. So next we have Ghost Town, town with an NE for new element. So this is roygbiv and Steve who teamed up to do this one. And they did a nice job at it. There's a lot going on here. So diving right in, we have our entrance on this side, and I think there's also an entrance on the other side, perhaps. But we'll start here. We have a little village inside here that's actually interesting because it's made up of the various themed buildings that came with the game with some added overlays onto it, like the Nitro sign here, the Medusa sign. On this side, we're using some of the stalls without theming, which I kind of like, and then some of the mine theming as well in here. Pretty nice looking town as it stands, especially with using the stock scenery. Here's the bank theming here using the actual bank objects, the ATM machines, or ATMs, I suppose, and it just looks nice. So here's Roller Coaster, very kind of dad joke-esque name, with a couple of cool elements here. So dive off that first drop into a quick airtime hill, up and into a flat section, dive off through a tunnel, and then we have kind of this neat S-bend, up and over, back crossing under, up, down, and curve again, wraps around to a mid-course break, or, oops, sorry, I'm wrong, down and around to a couple airtime hills in the turnaround here. This comes back over again, wraps around a pretty long coaster as it stands. Here we are, up and over top again to a mid-course break of some sort, a little later on in the layout. As we drop down to the photo spot, final hill, another tunnel, and back into the station. So operationally, this one works really well. That brake run is just in time so that this whole thing can take off with 3 trains running smoothly. Got some nice detailing here with the wood fence down the lift hill, the cog here for the lift chain, I suppose. And a pretty good layout overall. Some of the bits are a little bit awkward, some like this S-bend out and S-bend back in, but on the whole, it looks really nice. So back to the park itself, we have this plaza of sorts here. A lot of these one tile wide pathways, which is nice. It feels very much like that classic park making. Then we'll cross the river here to the other side where we have the gambling and poker on the games section here, I would guess. So here we have some food stalls, a little bit of the jokes like the 77% gold mine runs. We have our jokes here. Here is Jappy, of course, unfortunately. Using the mint pieces here for some smoke coming up. I like that. That's a pretty nice use of that object. So here's more of the, this is a boothel, of course, because it's got the skeleton on top. This is definitely a park made by Steve. Here we have CC9 without a paddle and a nice little boat here, and then another one down here. So this is Josh winning the popular vote, as he is wont to do. And then a nice little fort here, crossing the river and heading up the mountain. Here is SA coming back, so good to have him back also. And the landscaping here is something pretty nice too, using the red sand and the tan sand, I suppose. Really sets off nicely against all this. It feels very Western, has that overall look to it. So here is the actual park entrance, according to the game here. So we have some more confused people looking around, looking for the forums. More of this fort type design with more shops and stalls and things inside, more smoke and all of that. Also the train tracks here that are wrapping around, and a functional train at that. So that's always a nice touch there. So here it is, coming in from the side. So this is the ghost train apparently. And then off to the other side, crossing the river once again, we've got the ghost boats. So definitely tying together a theme here. So some nice theming coming out of the station here to the water splash on the corner. Here's a big tunnel wrapping around into that lift hill. So we're hiding a lot of that big lift hill, which is kind of nice. And then this substantial drop here with the cannon spraying the water out. I think that's a nice touch. Another one of the boats down here. Here's Liam keeping NE afloat as he does. And then another mix-in of the great stock scenery, like this mine shaft piece here, with the fully customized station building using the unicorn statue here on top. So it's nicely mixed together, which I like, using both the stock scenery and custom scenery. Well, custom as in wall built and wall and roof and that type of scenery put together to make something more custom than the stock elements. So heading up the mountain here, we have the fort that runs all the way along the backside here, and it's kind of set up for more of the kind of jokes here as we go around. So we have more of the characters walking throughout. The Anybot crash landing. Here's CP6. That's me, the white wizard, apparently. So I don't know if that's good or bad. I hope it's good. But I have a nice little house here and some snow, which is nice because I like the cold weather. So lots of little bits to look at. I just like all the fun details here. The little gravestone here by the tree, and just lots of really nice landscaping, something that Steve does really well, and so does Roy. And just lots of detail in here, lots of things to look at. Definitely one of the stronger entries as far as I'm concerned. So well done. Would have been nice to see maybe another coaster in there, but at 60 by 60, this is already pretty crowded as it is, although it is a little more open up here, but that was clearly intentional. But this wooden coaster acts pretty well for one, and there's enough other supporting stuff in here to look at, and I certainly like the use of all the clickable staff members and things like that to tell a story through the space. Alrighty, next up, we are going to look at the Great Mesa Gateway. So this is Camcorder 22 and Coco. This was disqualified, unfortunately. There is a 60 by 60 map limit, and clearly they have used quite a bit more, though I understand there's certain controversy about that, as there might want to be. So this is a pretty impressive map, for one, just because of the size of it and what was done with it. We have lots of trains coming in here. The Transcontinental Railroad heading off in a number of different directions here, and then coming back into the center. Along with it, you have these telegraph lines and the various outcroppings of rock here. This one has a water tower with it, and then there's various other ones of these out on the side. This one also has got a water tower and some kind of abandoned sidings and other bits and pieces. We have a couple of wagons and things like that further out. So just lots of little details throughout. All these are sort of the same looking with all those different pieces, but just varied enough that it's pretty interesting. And then here we have the actual structure of sorts. A big runway on top here for this plane, a couple of hangars, and these stock scenery pieces like the gas station and some of the buildings here used to effect. There's a pretty substantial mine train that wraps around everything here, but let's continue looking at the theming first. Here's some airships that come out on either end. Pretty cool hangars here, also using those wires to come down. On this side, we've got the oil derrick, presumably powering some or all of this with the fire here. So you're going to get a little toasted if you're sitting on that side. And then inside, we've got the trains all wrapping around in various spots. Sort of anchoring the middle of this is the elevator ride here. So this is Old Rusty. You can see on the whole thing here, it's a nice little observation tower. And then over on this side, we've got our air traffic control tower, which I assume is for this giant runway here as well. I like using the gravestone markers here as the presumably the little lights on the runway itself. This is a pretty neat structure here, using the green, which is a bold choice, especially this shade of green. But I like that a lot. Peeps popping up right here. But this is sort of our Grand Central Terminal here. And then we have just the paths that come off here into sort of nothing as it exits. So definitely an oasis in the middle of the desert. Great Mesa, as it turns out. So here is the Great Mesa runaway train. Let's get our bearings here. So we did just leave the station, and this is a pretty substantially long ride. So let's take a look. We're going to go through a piece of trick track here around the launch tower, and then we're going to head up the lift hill. So let's get situated to see that. Definitely a mine train-esque layout here with the two lift hills side by side, with the open-sided covering on top. I always like that look. It is nice. But we're probably going to lose this as it's going in and out through a lot of the scenery here, but we'll do our best to hang on. So we're going to dive down, wrap around this little waterfall and oasis, actually through the waterfall, back out the other side, down and around, through the middle here, and then there's a lot of crossover in and out of tunnels, looping around here into the brakes, and now we're going to head up lift hill number 2. This side's a little more visible here, where we can see what it's doing here, diving underneath of the runway, and then wrapping around the air traffic control up here too. So there it goes. Top speed, 57 miles an hour, way fast for a mine train, but again, more fantasy-esque layout. That's pretty cool throughout. Curving back around, and then we're going to head back into the building again. Oops. Let's see. There we are. Coming out on the other side, up and around, and then this is going to wrap around and take us back into the brakes. Hard to follow, for sure, but it also gives you the ability to explore a little bit. There's definitely a lot of buried theming in here and some pretty interesting elements to look at through the whole thing. It's just a cool backdrop when you zoom out the whole way. There's a lot to see, and it's well done as far as creating that desert feel, the sort of isolated feel of the whole thing with the trains coming in from all sides. And then suddenly we have these airships and runways and all sorts of stuff with this mine train wrapping around the whole thing. So neat map as a whole. I can see why it got disqualified, but it is pretty cool as it stands individually. So nice work to that. Alrighty, so let's move on. So we have the International Mars Station Orion. This is by Lewis, one of a couple of Mars themed ones. So let's pass up on that coaster here first and get in for to look at everything. We've got a lot of these greenhouses and various parts and pieces like that, and then some solar arrays here. Let's pick up this train. So we have the IMS Orion. So this is a pretty neat theme here with the space station and the big panel arrays that come out, stretching across this entire thing. So we're going to hold here underground until this guy crosses the block breaks. We'll pick up on him in just a second. Using the kind of minimalistic approach, but it's also very organized, which I like. The path that kind of wraps around the one thing. So we have one loop of path, and then the landscape is set up well with the red rock Mars surface here underneath the pathway, and then the sort of brown and black or gray rock texture. So going up here, we have the Hulk-style launch with the inversion up top. Some custom scenery too, through a loop, and then we'll curve out and around, and then down into the Cobra roll. Definitely a pretty strong layout overall. Zero G roll up and over top of everything, dive down underneath that solar array, into the mid-course brakes, around the corner here, and through not just one corkscrew, but a second. I like how this one goes up and over the path, and then here we have the path that just kind of pops up and down over top of the coaster coming in also. So nice look overall. A fantasy park with a realistic coaster in the middle. A little bit odd, perhaps, but I think that's kind of par for the course for a lot of these parks also. But I like the look. I like that the map isn't a square. I think that's nicely done because it's a sort of pleasant round piece. It doesn't feel lopsided or anything. The theming itself is kind of samey as you get around. I mean, it's hard to do much on Mars for one, but the shuttle or the space station thing here is definitely the best looking of the architecture, and then the rest of this we have a lot of sort of copy and pasted solar array here and here, and then all these various little greenhouses and things like that kind of become similar across the whole map. It would have been nice to have some variety in there, but I can understand why you wouldn't either. But nice looking thing, great attempt at the custom supports. We haven't seen a whole heck of a lot of that to any large extent anyway, but well done throughout. All right. Next up, we are going to look at the Melting Pot. This is by Liampie. And it starts off with 4 coasters in one wrapping this tower. So a neat look here with all 4 of them coming around at the same time. So let's take each of these one by one. We'll start with the orange just because we're about at the top of the lift hill for that. We are stopped and waiting on some block breaks here, so we will sit and admire the central tower that's got a lot of things going on. So 4 different themes kind of all tied together into this big tower with a round element on top here, and just some various little added details, things like that, using the chocolate bar pieces here as textures. It's pretty interesting. But layout diving off, another diagonal tunnel, which is great. Up into the Batwing as the first element. And then off here into a loop. Turn around, utilizing this tunnel a second time, which is a cool look. A dive down and then a dive back throughout. 2 more corkscrews and a helix to bring it back home. I think I've actually started with my favorite layout from what I remember of my first viewing in this. Good theming, pretty minimal. A lot of fences and landscape throughout, but it's definitely a distinctive look compared to the rest of them as well. So let's jump to that other side. Conveniently, we're about to peek here for the blue one. So definitely a different layout here with this kind of jump and dive. Down and around into the Cobra roll. A corkscrew, a loop, in reverse order from what I just said, then back into the brakes. And then here we have a go-kart track as well, so this is Drifter. The coaster itself is called Floater. Here we have pollution nutrition, and some various checkerboard themes. And I like the lollipops here used as different colors for the different elements here. So very industrial looking here compared to the wood and dirt that we had in the last side. So let's jump over to the pink, which is sitting here waiting for the block to clear, and it just has. So this is the no inversion or coaster. We used 4 different corkscrew coasters here, so you got to have some bit of variety. Up into that hill with a little bit of a flat top on it, which looks a little odd perhaps. Around the corner, up through. This one is called Ecstasy, by the way. Down and around, loop through, and here we are back to the station. Lots of color theming here. This kind of reminds me of this aquarium park that Liam did, one of that similar look. So this is Bounty out here on its own in the water, which I like. We have Beacon here, our slide ride. But a lot of nice bright colors here. Definitely the most sort of in your face of the various themes with the blue and the yellow and the orange. It's a nice look throughout. Finally, transition over here to the one that's using the landscape the most. It's got a canyon here with the coaster sitting through the middle. So kind of something that needs to be viewed in a couple of different angles. But let's start with this one as we see the coaster coming up and over. So this is Ohm. Interesting looking double down into the first corner here that goes up and around with the Cobra Roll, again pathway in prime position. Another tunnel, wrap around into another tunnel, back across using this pathway once more, and then heading back up into what I presume is a dive down here into the final bit as we pop up on the other side. Kind of a shame you can't see any of that underneath, but it gets it back quickly. This has some great architecture. This is probably my favorite section of the 4 as far as architecture goes. Built into the cliffside, utilizing some of those more unique scenery pieces like the mints here and the chocolate pieces, but also some of the more traditional castle and brick elements with a couple of the Chinese roofs in here as well to give it some variety. Landscaping wise is pretty striking and definitely requires that you look at it from a few different angles to get into it. Nice little seating area here with the mausoleum element on that side, and then wrap around and there's even more theming on this side. I would almost have taken this section and turned it to the inside so then the whole thing looks upon the same canyon versus this looking outwards. But you know, the way as far as connectivity goes, you can kind of feel that center tower here with the 4 coasters wrapping around it and heading off to their respective areas as the guests can come in and out to each of those different spaces and then cross in between on the outsides here. Nice use of the jumping fountains here, which are pretty something you don't often see. But a good look overall. It would have been kind of interesting to use 4 different coasters for this rather than the 4 corkscrew coasters, but I like that each one sort of has its own unique layout to it. The sort of hyper variety over here without the inversions. This has got a more sort of realistic flowing layout on this one, and then the yellow using the terrain and the tunnels throughout, and then the blue sort of cruising overhead on this one. But I would say as far as favorites go, this orange guy here, the Savage, that is definitely my favorite of the layouts. And then on this side, from an architecture standpoint, the architecture in the area with Ohm is my favorite looking. Also, the nice use of the black dirt pathways. You don't see that done very often. Alrighty. Next, we are into Memory Lane by Chocotopian. So this is a jumble of stuff, especially up here, but there's a lot to see. So let's find our entrance, which is down here. So this is Past Connections, where we have some nice little pleasant areas here in the opening for Grand Carousel and Wendy's Tower. And then a couple of different pieces here, like the Pier Tram and Memory Lane, which is a go-kart track. So you're driving through all the various memories, I'm going to assume. Good architecture throughout. I mean, it's pretty simple architecture. Again, mixing the stock stuff with the put together elements. A little bit randomized when you look at it from the backside here, but when you turn to this side, this feels very much like a boardwalk type structure that has sort of the various elements, like this Chinese roof here with all the Native American teepee and other things like that, where it's sort of an amalgamation and a little bit messy, but it fits. I think it works okay. Heading back in the other direction, here is the rowing boat for hire, and then on this side we have a little medieval town here with some couple of elements here, a little tavern, and some of the stock buildings that are part of all that scenery packet. Great looking little tavern building of sorts out here in the corner. Liking that quite a bit. I think that is one of the better looking buildings on the map. Wrapping around to the middle, we have the U maze through all the various gardens here. And then up on the hill, we've got a castle that you can drive right on through. There's no name for the castle itself, but we have the moat around it. And then the go-kart track that comes across. And then you can walk up to the door, but you can't go in, unfortunately. Over on this side, we've got the Boleyn course, little UK-themed miniature golf. So a couple of different holes here. Looks like 4 holes in general, but that's it. And now we get into sort of the meat of everything here in the middle. We have the bell tower in the middle. With a pretty substantial looking tower here, utilizing the modern scenery on the kind of detailing elements around the building. Looking really nice, actually. That blends in better than I would have expected it would. But this is the city as a whole. We have the rush hour coaster here. Let's hide everything else and see if we can't take a look at this. So coming out of the station, got a nice little dive here around some of the buildings up underneath. Then we'll cross through, pop out again, wrap around, duel there with the monorail just a minute. Figure 8 down and into the underground. Then we'll pop out again, flat corner, back into the underground. And now we're going to lose it until we hit that second lift hill up over here. We'll wrap around a couple more times here. Flat corner, taking pretty good speed past the subway. A nice theme there. And then we're going to head back up for lift hill number 3. So this one's going all the way to the top of the city, past what I think is maybe one of the better elements in the park, that cool nitro billboard. Let the go-karts race around. So here we drop through, down into the buildings, up and around. Have a nice little diagonal section through this diagonal building, which is a nice designed structure there. All the way down to the bottom once again, jumping over the pathway, wrap around there at some speed, and then we're back underground here. So we will hit the lift hill, and then that lift hill is going to take us back home to the brakes. All right. So the theming here is pretty dense, so it's a little hard to pick apart, but there's a pretty good use of these individual structures to make a larger building, especially these couple here on top, and then this guy is just the one-off straight building in there. But then there's things like this where we have the glass building that's got all the different parts and pieces inside of it, so there's definitely some things going on inside. Here we have the overground railway coming through, and then lots of rides and things buried through here, all the queue lines. Here's another station for the go-karts coming through, so it's a pretty substantial go-kart track that comes around and carries this whole thing together. Here you can see that roto drop right here before it actually drops. I think that's a neat touch for this whole area. But pretty impressive amount of density here, especially on the hillside. So it lets you stack it up a little bit and make it look even thicker than it is, which I do like. The rush hour coaster is a little bit all over the place, so maybe a bit hard to follow. But I mean, it definitely forces you to explore a little bit and makes you get in there and remove some scenery, dig around, and try and tackle all of that. So well done, good work on this park. Alrighty, so now we are going to look at the NE Central servers by CC9, and this one will be our final review for today. And then we'll pick up the rest in part 3. But jump in here, we have more of a another new element themed attraction. So with our servers pulling together all sorts of things from a couple of different areas into one. So starting out, we've kind of had this neat mainframe infrastructure utilizing the wood pieces and these metal rails and everything. This wraps all the way around. Colors differently for each of the different areas. We got blue, green, orange, and red, which I do kind of like because each one of those informs a little bit of the color within. So let's wrap around and look inside here first. So this is Anga Al Mugrib. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but it is a B&M hypercoaster. No inversions, but a pretty simple layout here. Big drop into the helix, hop up and over the lift hill, and then another airtime hill back and into the station. So a little short, a little bit of a shame because I think there could have been a lot more done with that layout, but nice overall colors and ties that scheme together. I like this structure here with the castle, utilizing the jelly bean walls. A lot of 2x2 though, so it gets a little bit samey, although the elevation change helps that, and then some of these clusters of things together also assist in that look. Have our oasis here in the middle, and then some of these more ruined buildings out here with the marketplace throughout. And then also just hidden in the corner here, we have Genie's Palace, another 1001 Nights type ride. So that is coming across here from the outgoing server 185.92122 that goes to this equipment here. Then on this side, we've got a little smaller section with a boomerang. This one is oriented in the right direction, still a little bit too short as far as the train spacing goes, or it should be 7 cars, but more realistic building here, I'm guessing. So this is Vekoma 1995, according to the piece there, and we have some games inside here with the target practice, and then the Enterprise here, which is calling out as Hus from 1978. Then we have our Twister here, the Scrambler, Mr. Twist, Carousel here from 1954, and then a lot of these little structures with the facades on here. Pretty simple facades. Maybe could have had a little bit more to them, but it feels pretty simple as far as architecture goes. And then in the back here we have an old Togo, RIP for that. So such a shame. And then we have our little green wire coming out of the NE main server here and heading to that location. So let's follow Orange now to this side where we have the Buzzsaw. Pretty good standard name for a wooden coaster there. Pretty simple layout again, but actually I really like this one. I like this one better than the B&M on the other side. So nice drop into that figure 8, and then the pop up and over the drop. A little bit awkward here how the drop goes underneath of the curve, but it does wrap around here back underneath the structure and then comes out into the brake run. So good design there using the proper 12-car GCI trains also, and the watchtower observation tower here. And then on this side we have Rock Slide, which has this kind of neat viewing area just in front of it there. No buildings on this side, just rides mostly, but it does kind of owe to it being a pretty small area compared to something like this guy, which is big. Although it's kind of a shame that this wasn't used as well as this one, for example. I mean, we're taking up most of the space here with a pretty good layout overall and a good look. So a little bit of a shame. But let's jump over to this guy. We have our sort of Asian-esque theme. So this is Ryojin. It is a shuttle coaster. Not quite sure which kind it is meant to be, so we're going to just call it more of a fantasy look. So that's loading here, and while it loads, we can see the Fluttering Cherry Blossom Scrambler ride, and then we have our Bell Tower ride on this side. And here we go, starting with a reverse lift, which I like, is pretty interesting and unique. And custom supports, so good point for that. Diving in through a loop, up and over and through the spike, then back around, down, and back in. Definitely has that nice kind of Chinese vibe here with cherry blossom trees and the pinks and the greens, using some of that pagoda scenery and some of the darker red coloring throughout. Not too much in the way of buildings as well. We have our attempt at the station here, but not too much else. I kind of like the attempt on the larger piece here inside this ancient type area. I would have almost have liked to have seen that attempt as far as structures go in all of these other ones, but I can understand why that might not have had the time to put through all of that or the space. But impressive look, definitely has that connectivity theme as far as all the wiring coming out to all these various elements on the boxes, and nice theming on those as well, just from a differentiation standpoint. They all have a little bit of a unique look to each one. So nicely done there. And this is where we're going to stop for the day. When we pick up next time, we're going to look at the eventual winner, actually. Spoiler alert. But we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more, including some really good ones. So stay tuned for more and come back and see episode 3, which I'll hopefully record tomorrow. If you would like your park reviewed by me on this channel, feel free to send me a note to Cedar.6 on the New Element RCT forums, or feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube channel there and let me know what you'd like to see. So again, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll tune in next time when we wrap up this series reviewing the New Element Flash Contest entries. Thank you for watching.